Numerology is similar to astrology, is an ancient form of self-help. In fact, it was one of the original forms of self-help. If you look at any religion and ancient philosophy, numbers have played a significant role, not only in their symbolism, but just in their meaning and really helping us understand what is happening and what is to come.
We're like, well, if we have to be here and this is what I have to do, then how can I start doing who I want to be right where I'm at? And so for me, I wanted to write my books. To me, I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be somebody who traveled around the world and going into companies to create impact. And Anniston reminded me, well, you're in a company right now. Why don't you impact them right here? And that was when I started taking what my practices were, what my beliefs were, the processes that today bring into organizations. That's where I really got to hone my skills of being able to see, does this work?
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Anniston, and this is Empowered Life.
Welcome back to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Anniston Ricksteins, and I am joined today by my co-host, Rudi Ricksteins. And do we have an episode for you?
So today you're going to get to learn a little bit of what is it like to live in my house and what kind of conversations do we have at any given time. And if you followed us for a while, you're going to know that very little of what we do is surface level. We like to get into the weeds in who are we, where are we going, what's the value, the purpose, and the meaning behind everything. And then we look for the magic that is ever present in every moment and in everything. And if you pay close enough attention, you can also start to find tremendous clues about the value and the meaning, not only in where you've been, where you are, but where you're going.
At the time of recording this, we are just a few days shy and almost about to be in 2024. And this is a time when everyone really is reflecting. You're reflecting. Hopefully you listened to our last two podcasts, which are really about setting you up for 2024 and sharing some of our greatest tips, tools, and tricks on how you can do that. But this episode, I think, is really going to round it out nicely because we're going to talk about something that's called personal years in numerology. This is a predictive form of numerology. And for those of you that don't know what numerology is, it's the belief, it's an ancient tool actually, and a belief that numbers have meaning. Numbers have spiritual meaning, and that when you can look at the significant numbers in your life, such as your birth date, that you can find out really significant and important information about who you are, your overall personality, but also your life path and your life purpose. And within this tool or this spiritual practice of numerology is also what we call predictive numerology. And that speaks into different cycles and seasons that we all encounter on our life. The most natural thing in the universe is expansion, growth, and change. And personal year cycles, which is what we are going to be talking about today, is basically a 9-year cycle that we all follow. We all fall in different points in the cycle, but it's really important, I believe, to know where you are in your cycle, in your 9-year cycle, because that's going to kind of give you the theme of your year. I would liken it to knowing the theme of the party that you're about to go to. If you didn't know what the theme was, then you wouldn't be able to show up maybe with the right mindset. What would you wear? You wouldn't feel prepared prepared walking in, not knowing what you were going to find. And when you're walking into a new year, you're walking into a new energy. I know this can sound a little bit complex, but it's actually quite simple once you understand the system.
So for anybody that's listening right now and thinks, oh my God, this is way over my head, I am right there with you. And so I have been beautifully married to Anniston for almost 13 years now. And I will never forget when we first started dating, my brother had given me a few months before that a book on numerology. And when Anniston came to stay with me, when we had moved in together, I gave her this book and I was like, oh, my brother gave me this book. It's really fascinating. And she started, leafing through it. And I expected her to do what I did. Look at it, read the beginning, read the part that was about me and be like, oh yeah, that was important. Close the book and put it down. No, she inhaled this book. And I use those words so beautifully because it's best describes how she consumes information. And then after that, she was like, I really want to, pick up this other book on numerology. And then, oh, there's another book on numerology. And then she came home one day and she said, I really want to do this course. And okay, so she signed up for a course. And then she took another elevated course. And then eventually she got her master's in numerology. And through all of this, the value in her having this information is she can put context to some of the emotions that we're feeling. And so I do not have the desire in me to read every numerology book that's out there, or even know and or understand the process of numerology, because I have my own in-house numerology expert. But what I love about this and what I'm challenging you to do today is to listen to this with an open mind, like I am every time Anniston comes to me with something as it relates to numerology, because I can be really introspective. I can, just find myself in the weeds and I'm really processing and I have a lot of emotion around where I'm at and I'm feeling stuck. And she'll go, oh, babe, it's because you're in this month and this year and this, and then it makes sense. And then you don't feel so connected to it. It's almost like, oh, it's supposed to be this way. And I just want you to sit back and listen and ask yourself, where are you? Which year are you in? And how are you going into it? Or how was last year for you? So that it just really makes a little bit of sense to you. Because when you have more information, you have better choices and it's easier for you to be able to process.
It's interesting to me that numerology isn't quite as well known as astrology. Astrology has like blown up in the West, and it's very common for people to say, what's your sunshine? Sun sign, not sunshine, sun sign. What's your rising sign and your moon sign? And people are conversating about this. It's become normalized to have this conversation. In fact, our daughter the other day is wanting to know more about her sun sign and talking about it with her friends. And she's 8, but she loves it. And numerology is similar to astrology, is an ancient form of self-help. In fact, it was one of the original forms of self-help. If you look at any religion and ancient philosophy, numbers have played a significant role, not only in their symbolism, but just in their meaning and really helping us understand what is happening and what is to come. Now, if you expand out a little bit and you start to look at the world around us and the way that the universe works, there is no accidents. There's no, random occurrences that we believe in. And even mathematically, that is starting to be proven. If you look at cycles and seasons of our planets, the moon cycles that we follow, the cycles and season, not only of the plant world, but the animal world, everything follows, a pattern. And humans also have cycles and seasons, or what I like, and they're energetic patterns that we follow. So this brings us to the personal year cycles. Your personal year cycles, it starts at 1 and it runs through 9. And I like to think of the personal year cycle as a storyline. There's in every story, there's a beginning and an end, and then there's lots of things that happen in the beginning. And because we naturally move through these personal year cycles every year, it's keeping us into a constant state of flux and change, because becoming stagnant is not natural. It's not natural for anything in this world to be stagnant. And so every year, as you move through whatever 9-year cycle that you're in, there's going to be a different theme. There's going to be new opportunities, there's a new energy to interact with. And when you can know what year you're in and what year you're going into, it just helps you prepare, as Rudi said, to be able to reframe and to give context to things, to energy with which you can't see, so that you don't find yourself in those moments of challenge, or where you're thinking, gosh, this feels really hard, and you think it's going to be like this forever, and you have no idea why. I also find that my love for numerology and the understanding of my own numbers, as well as my own personal year cycles, is that I have a lot of compassion for people, because I know that at any given point, we're all working on our own issues. We're all at different points. And just because someone's not going through what you're going through right now doesn't mean that they won't go through it. And it gives such a beautiful perspective to life. So what I want to do today is to, first of all, tell you how you can calculate your own personal year so you can follow along. And then I'm just going to give you a real brief, high level understanding of the energy and the theme of each of the personal year cycles. So personal years cycles run from January 1st all the way to the end of the year. Now, there are some numerologists who do believe that they start at your birthday and they run till the next birthday. I adhere to the belief that there is a shift because the date shifts, right? So you go from, let's say, December 31st, 2023 to January 1st, 2024. These are all very different numbers that you're working with, and you are going to experience a shift. But as you move closer to your birthday, that's where the number gets stronger. So each year, of course, is going to have its different theme. The way for you to calculate which year that you are currently in is to look at, first by looking at your birth month and your birthday, and then in the year that you're in or the year that you're going in. So I'm going to use Rudi as an example. Okay, his birth date is May 6th. So I would look at the numerical equivalent of May is 5, right? And then his day of birth is 6. So 5 plus 6 is 11. But then I would add it not to his birth year. I would add it to the year that we are in right now, which is 2023. Well, 2023, if I can reduce those, add up all those digits together and reduce it to one digit, is a 7. So then I would take that 5 plus 6 plus 7. What is that? 11 plus 7, 18. So then that would equal 18. Now in numerology, you're always going to reduce down to one digit. So I would take that 18, reduce it to one digit by continuing to add. So I would say 1 plus 8 equals 9. You're looking at me like this is so difficult. For all of you that are listening, maybe you're like walking and you're thinking, how am I going to write this down? I'm going to put this in the show notes for you. So you can absolutely look there for the example that I just gave you. The only caveat to reducing down to one digit is if when you add up all those numbers, your month, your day of birth, and the current year or the year that you're going into, if it equals an 11 or a 22 or a 33, those are master numbers. So what you would do is you would say, I'm going into an 11/2 year. I'm going to explain what those master numbers mean, but it's significant enough that you need to keep in mind if you do wind up having a master number, because it generally means that you're going to experience, let's say with an 11/2, you would experience the energy of a 2-year with like a big zing to it. So usually those master number years are real pivotal years in somebody's life. So you don't want to miss that. So again, I'll put that all in the show notes.
So before we jump into each of the year and the values, for anybody that's still sitting and trying to understand what is the purpose of the value in going through and listening to the remainder of this episode, I want you to know that Anniston supports a massive 3,000 person company, and she is an executive inside the organization, but for fun, she loves to bring the numerology into work. And so at one point in time, it was just like a little Christmas party thing that they did. And she hosted it to a really small group, and she shared, the year coming up and what each person's year was, and everybody calculated what year they were in, what year they were going into. And then she said, this year's going to feel like this, and this year's going to feel like that. And I got to watch from the sidelines for the remainder of that year how people would start to quote the year they're in, the month they're in, the reason they're experiencing. Somebody on a call at one point in time turned around and said, oh, you're like that because of your year that you're in. And so it really bought into this whole concept of having this level of awareness. And she has done it every single year since. And what's most beautiful to watch from the sideline is that it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and more and more and more people are participating in this. And she's got one of these calls coming up literally now next week. And so I just want to encourage you that as you continue to listen to this, even though we're telling you take your birth month or your birthday and then add it to the year that you want to calculate in, and it sounds like it's really complicated, I promise you it's really simple, but the value is so profound. So I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. Before we do, I do want to preface one thing, because this is the Empowered Life podcast. I believe that numerology, astrology, any kind of predictive form of anything, right? It's just information, it's feedback, but you always have free will. At no point is there anything that has power over you. I don't believe that, there is some destiny that's decided and then you have no choice in the matter. And at no point should you feel disempowered in learning what your personal year is. It really is information. I would equate it to, the weather is the weather, right? If it's a sunny day outside, well, you get to decide when you walk out the door, how are you going to respond to that sunny day, right? Are you going to maximize that sunny day? Are you going to feel grateful about it? Are you going to wear the right clothing? Or are you going to be completely unprepared, walk out in a heavy coat and feel really hot? Again, free will. We all have free will. This is about you deciding, how can I work with the energy? That's what I like to ride the wave of energy of the year that I'm going into, so I can maximize it. I can get the best out of it. I can learn the most from it. So I'm that much more prepared for the next year. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully by now you have calculated your own personal year number. If you want to hit pause, I highly recommend you do the calculation for your spouse, for your kids, for some of your coworkers if you want. And that way you can have an understanding not only of your year you're going into, but those that are closest to you. So let's kick it off with year number 1. 1 is the first year, obviously, in a 9-year cycle. So it is about new beginnings. This is like a blank canvas for you to create on. I love 1 years because this is where you get to get really clear on, like, what do I want? What do I want this next chapter in my life to be? What seeds am I going to be planting in the ground and then nurturing so that over the coming 9 years, I am harvesting that which I want to see. Rudi is going into his 1 year this year. And the 1 year is the 3rd year in what I call a 3-year push. And you'll know more about that as we get to the latter part of the 9-year cycle. And because your 8 year is really about abundance, and then your 9 years about letting go, and the 1 year is really externally focused. In a 1 year, it's about me. It's about the individual. And whereas other years might be more about you interacting with other people and how, your relationships, the 1 year is really about its independence. It's how you stand on your own 2 feet. And it will be a little bit more of what I would call like a self-centric year, but it needs to be. That is by design. And so I always say in a 1 year, like, you need to get, like, what do you want, and who do you want to be? And this year is going to challenge you. It's going to challenge you where you are codependent. Like, where are you too dependent on other people, or where do you give your power away? Those kinds of things will come up. Do you remember your last 1 year?
No, was that when
So Rudi actually came. So this was the last 1 year for him, which was 9 years ago, was when he really first started showing up online as a coach and putting content out there. And I remember it was a big thing for you. It was a big move. It was a big move. It was a big step forward.
I was going to say, that was when I announced to the world that I had an ability to be able to receive or perceive.
You were an intuitive.
Yeah, intuitive information. And I remember how nerve-wracking that was. And, not knowing numerology at the time, or the value of the meaning of what was happening, it makes so much sense in hindsight, being able to look into it and say, I was self-employed at the time. I owned 3-4 businesses at that time. And I was now making a really dramatic shift. And so everybody that knew me from all my past, jobs or friendship circles, I had come out now as a completely different person with different interests, and showing a very, very strong shift in my spiritual growth. And a lot of people were like, whoa, didn't see that coming. And that was the beginning of how I started to step into my personal power and becoming a coach and speaking on stages. And it really was the beginning of an incredible journey.
I can't remember. I think it might have also been roundabout when we started hosting meetups in our home. Mm-hmm. That was a big thing. So a 1 year is about innovation. It's about creativity and innovation. This is a year where you're going to get ideas and you're going to get these desires that might not make sense to the world around you. And you have to honor them, because the 1 is going to bring in the new, right? So these ideas you have might not be things you've seen before, or things you've seen modeled before, but you have to honor the desires and the dreams that are on your heart that come through you. And so I think your journaling practice is really important in a 1 year, is really making sure that you're honoring, whatever intuitive hits you get, and that you're starting to anchor them. Planting that seed is a really good visual whatever you have to do to start to anchor. Because if you just let these ideas stay in the ethereal, in the air, where you're not doing anything with them, then you're not planting anything. So taking action and making sure that you're starting to move forward on whatever that is, and then being really confident to stand on your own 2 feet and trust that what is coming to you naturally is coming for a reason. And so the 1 year is going to challenge you to step up, to step out and expand.
I want to just preface the words that Anniston is using is you're going to be challenged and you're going to be pushed, or it's going to be hard. I want to reframe that slightly, because everything that you want is in planting these seeds and in the being challenged. And, I don't think that I've experienced a 1 year as a hard or a difficult year in any of them, but there is a choice to make. It's like, am I going to do something I haven't done before? And for some people that can feel hard, but for many people that can be the most exhilarating and freeing feeling.
Yeah. So that's your 1 year. So for those of you going into a 1 year, congratulations, you're starting a new chapter. Now let's move on to personal year number 2. Now, if the 1 year was about me, the 2 is about we. As you plant a seed, right? You plant the seed and then you don't see it sprout up right away, right? You might have to pick some weeds here and there, but there's a gestation period. There's a period where it looks to the naked eye like nothing is happening. The 2 year is a nice respite from the previous 3 years of hustle, change, lots going on externally. The 2 year is going to pull you back in, just like the waves. Some waves, they come in with a force and then the ocean pulls it back in. This is one of those years. It's going to pull you back within. The 2 symbolizes emotions. And so this is a year that can be very emotionally up and down, because you're going to feel things. But with that feeling, you have access to a tremendous amount of intuition. It's a really good year for writers and poets and songwriters, really just to access these deeper parts of you. But with that, if there are some things that you've been repressing, like repressed emotions as it relates to things in your past, relationships, they will naturally bubble to the surface. So this is a really big relationship year. I'm trying to remember my last 2 year. I do remember that it felt a lot slower than the previous years. And I love movement, change. And so that was a bit of an adaptation for me. And then I also remember, I get along with people pretty well. I'm not easily triggered. And I think it's because I do a lot of work on myself, but also, but that year in particular, I remember being triggered a lot more by, my work situation and things that were happening. And I felt kind of out of control with how I was responding to situations. So the 2 is here to teach you diplomacy. The 2 is here to teach you how to zoom out from a situation and always remember that you get to choose how you respond, and that life is going to require you to work with other people. And any dream is going to require collaboration. It's never just a one-man show. You're always going to have to bring team into it. And this is the year where you get really good at working in groups towards a common goal, or, healing relationships that have needed healing, having those healing conversations. And it's a really good year also for finding new relationships. So for those of you looking for a soulmate and you're going into a 2 year, you are in luck. Now, if we talk about the 11-2, I'll talk about that briefly, because if you did the calculation and you came up with the master number 11, the 11 is going to mark this year as a pivotal one. And it can come in many different ways. So whatever is happening to you in this 2 year is going to leave a mark with you internally in how you perceive and receive the world and respond to the world. But it also might mean that something big happens this year. It doesn't, just because it's not a 1 year or a year that's more externally focused, doesn't mean big things can't happen and that movement and change can't happen. It's just, it moves at a much slower speed. So if you are working on, let's say, bringing a big project out into the world, don't stop working on it. But this will be a year that's really going to teach you divine patience and divine timing, and trusting that if things are slow, that it's slow for a reason.
I remember in my 2 year, having just come out of what was my 1 year, which was Rudi trying to solo it. And then being forced to go inward. And I spent a lot of time with myself, a lot of time in meditation. It's really where I began honing my meditation practice. But that's also where I found my inner joy, my inner peace. And then naturally and by default, I started healing the relationships in my business, which was what was causing a tremendous amount of emotional toxicity for me. And the end of that year, I think it was really quite a beautiful coming together. Not only did our business flourish, did my relationships flourish, but the things that had been pulling me back or holding me back seemed to just dissolve and disappear. It really was a beautiful healing year.
Yeah, two is it's a good word for it. I think is healing, and it's a necessary one, but it will teach you patience. And so as long as you know that going in, then I think it helps because you're not expecting necessarily things to have to happen, like to happen right away and really, really quickly. And it's not always rejection. It's we believe it's redirection. And so if that happens in a 2-year, know that it's all by design. Now, if we move on to your 3-year, this is definitely one of my personal favorite years because the 3-year is just, it feels like a light breeze of spring after, a 2-year, which can feel a little bit heavier. And the 3-year is really about creativity. It's about self-expression. It's about self-improvement and travel and being social and fun. It's really about, allowing your creativity to be shared with the world. So if you've had, let's say, an idea that you wanted to write a book, this is a great year to write a book or to start a creative project or to get online and really to start sharing your voice confidently. Now, I mentioned self-improvement, and this is a year I believe that, in any year, there are gifts and then there are opportunities to learn. And because the gift of the 3-year is opportunities for you to be seen more and to be heard more, if you have issues around that, well, yeah, they're probably going to bubble to the surface. If you have fears around being seen or fears around being judged or rejected if you put your work out into the world, well, this year is a great opportunity for you to address that. And 3 years can be, like have unexpected shifts externally. You might travel unexpectedly. I think that it's one of those years that wherever you go, it's going to be a great learning opportunity, but really it's pretty social and fun. Do you remember your last 3-year?
I remember the end of my last 3-year with clarity. I couldn't tell you what happened throughout the beginning of the whole year, but I just remember towards the end was when new opportunities started to present themselves, where I began traveling a tremendous amount. We ended up moving. There was just a lot of change that came. And that breath of fresh air is a beautiful way to describe what that 3 felt like because for me at the time, we had just brought our son into the world and then it was our daughter and life was just became magical. It really felt extremely magical and freeing.
I remember your 3-year because I knew you were going into your 3-year, and the 3-year I always say is the year that you're going to talk your head off. Like that's by design. You're going to just start like talking, and whether it be in meetings or on stages or in start a podcast, and you had just begun that new job. And you were traveling like crazy and you were constantly on the phone and doing trainings and speaking. And it was such a change of pace from the year prior where you were kind of like, well, things are moving slowly. I don't really know what's happening. And then all of a sudden it came in with a boom. So I also, my last 3-year experienced really unexpected change. And I wound up, moving positions within my existing company and then, unexpectedly moving into a whole new job mid-year and then actually physically moving back to Wilmington. So the 3-year is going to bring some fun and excitement and hopefully some really great blessings your way. So if we move on to the 4-year, the 4-year is about implementation. This is a foundation building year, and it's a really, really important one because a lot of ideas will often come from your 3-year. That's when you're really creatively juiced and you're excited, and maybe you got that great book idea and you started writing the book and it was so much fun and exciting. Well, eventually at some point, you're going to have to get to the other tasks of book writing, which means maybe you need to create a book proposal and start, querying agents, or maybe you need to find a self-publisher, or you need to go through those more mundane kind of administrative tasks that you would have to do with anything. Let's say if you've got a business idea in your 3-year, well, how are you going to start to build that business idea? Your 4-year is a foundation laying year. It's where you lay the concrete and make sure it's really, really sound, that there aren't any cracks in the foundation. before you start to build on top of it, right? And so this can be a year where you're looking at every area of your life. And even if you are not consciously looking, things will come up. So my last 4 year was actually the year that COVID happened. And 4 years can by nature feel a little bit restrictive. They can feel like, things aren't, again, like the 2 year, things are kind of slowing down, giving you time to really put one foot in front of the other or one brick on top of the other, make sure it's correct. And then you're following the right steps. You're not going to have to go back and redo it again. You're looking at your finances. You're making sure your health is sound. You're making sure your relationships are sound. You're making sure that you've got the proper business plan. It's a good time for like long range planning. And so this is really a year for you to keep your head down, take one foot in front of the other, and trust that everything that you do is going to support you so much in the years to come. So because of that, some people can resist it. They can resist, the limitations or the perceived limitations of the 4 year or the slow nature of the 4 year, or resist the step-by-step process that the 4 year is going to call from you. It's going to say, put a system in place, put a process in place, make sure it's scalable, make sure this is working. And so if you can embrace that though, and know going in that this year is going to really support tremendous growth moving forward, I think it'll make it a lot easier.
My 4th year was a great year, but I reframed how I was looking at it. I remember taking this new job, and I'd been headhunted and I'd been working for myself for the last 10 or 12 years. And then all of a sudden I had a job, I had a boss, I had to be in an office, and it felt very restrictive. And Anniston and I had a really beautiful conversation, and there were many of them, but in the end of it, we had a beautiful conversation where we were like, well, if we have to be here and this is what I have to do, then how can I start doing who I want to be right where I'm at? And so for me, I wanted to write my books. To me, I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be somebody who traveled around the world and going into companies to create impact. And Anniston reminded me, well, you're in a company right now. Why don't you impact them right here? And that was when I started taking what my practices were, what my beliefs were, the processes that today bring into organizations. That's where I really got to hone my skills of being able to see, does this work? And it was a great year, and the results, were phenomenal. But it was a foundational year for me to be able to prove that was sustainable.
And that year, I believe this was also the year, and this is very symptomatic of a 4 year, where you're putting in all this work and you're not necessarily seeing the harvest of that. You're not seeing the results of that. And I remember that was the year, I believe, that as a company, you had set that, okay, we set a goal, and it was a really big goal. And so everything that you and the team were doing and putting into place, and the new strategies and really the coaching and all of that, like it was getting towards the last quarter of the year. And I remember you guys were still really kind of far off from that goal, but you didn't give up. And that's the key of a 4 year is it's resilience. It's making sure that you don't give up, because it wasn't until maybe like October, November of that year that all of a sudden, all of the fruits of what they've been working on started to pay off, and you wound up hitting that goal.
We did. We actually exceeded that goal by 12%, which is just insane.
Yeah.
When you know how big that company goal was, and knowing that going into the 4th quarter, we were so far behind. But again, we did the work, we got to reap the reward.
Love it. All right, so moving on with a 5 year. Now, the 5 year, again, is going to feel like a major shift from the 4 energy. The 5 is about freedom, and it's about change. And all of a sudden, all this work that you did in the 4 year, you're going to start to see the fruits of your labor coming forward, right? And the 5 year is that midway point in your 9-year cycle. And I like to say anything goes in a 5 year. And this will be a fantastic year for you if you are open to change, and if you are okay with expecting the unexpected. And this year will show you, the law of synchronicity and how things just come out of nowhere. And for me, like in my last 5 year, that was the year where in the very beginning, because my birthday is January 8th. So I'm like right at the beginning of the year, and I always get an intense dose of that new year energy. And it was I had just turned my 5 year, and that's when I got the very unexpected job offer that came out of nowhere for the job that I'm in right now. And I remember like turning to Rudi and being like, well, I knew my 5 year was coming, but man, did it come, man, did it show up this year. And then that year was, because it was still very much, there was a lot of COVID restrictions happening. I remember that year, that entire year, really not knowing. We didn't know when things were going to be, launching back up, or businesses were going to be reopening fully. We didn't know a lot of information. And that is so perfect for the 5, because it's really going to teach you what it looks like to trust. It's going to teach you what it looks like to make peace with the unknown and trusting that life is happening for me, not to me, and that no matter what happens or what comes, it's coming for a purpose.
I think the benefit of this is just to stay grounded in every single time something happens, know that it's happening for you, and just to get comfortable with trusting, regardless of whether you're in a 1 year, 5 year, a 9 year. It's just staying in a constant state of trust, because everything that you receive is an answer to something that you were once asking.
Yeah. Like if I was going into a 5 year and I had to pick one word, my one word to lean into, I would pick trust. Just trust. Or maybe faith. I think faith is even maybe a more an empowered way of being, is being faithful, and whatever that faith is, or what you believe in, and having faith that everything is going to be okay, and facing your fears, because fears, I think, come up a lot in a 5 year, because anytime we don't know, that we're outside of our comfort zone, or there's the unknown, it's natural for us to perceive that as fear. But we can just as easily reframe that to excitement, and reframe that to hope, and trusting that whatever comes my way in a 5 year is serving me, and it is going to serve me in growing. And so it's really important to say, what do I want? Where do I want to go? And also to not forget about the importance of discipline, because in a 5 year, because the theme is freedom, you are going to feel different senses of freedom. You're going to experience freedom in a different way. And it's a good opportunity for you to ask yourself the question, what is freedom to me? What does it mean to be free? And where does freedom actually come from? And what you'll realize, and hopefully what you'll find out this year through experience, is that true freedom only comes from within.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you realize, I am free, and I've been free all along to create my life. And at no point can anyone have control over me unless I give them control over me. All right, moving on with personal year number 6. So this year is really going to have a heightened family focus. The 6 is about love. It's about family, relationships, and responsibility. And it's also about giving back. And it's a very creative year as well. The 6 year is going to remind you that there is a responsibility in life, and that in relationships. And sometimes, you're going to be in a position of receiving, and sometimes you're going to be in a position of giving. In my last 6 year, Rudi's parents moved in with us for 9 months. And I remember knowing that this was my 6 year, and being like, well, of course they're going to be moving. And it was, it was a beautiful experience to have them living with us. They were moving to Wilmington, and before they found a home, we just said, why don't you move in with us for a while? But, like anything else, it changes the dynamics in the home, and you have to be generous in ways maybe that you haven't been generous with before. So I had an opportunity to be very generous with my time, with my home, with my space, and to experience those different aspects of me. But ultimately, it was a beautiful time. And it was a time that we got to spend a lot of time together, and my kids got to spend with their grandparents, and it was amazing. It was also a time of healing. And that's the other theme with 6 is, a lot of themes around love, but the most important love, which is self-love. And where are you not giving yourself love? And that will bubble to the surface for you. And also with your physical body, where am I, what chronic issues am I continuing to bring forward, and how can I address them? Like, what is my body trying to tell me? And that was basically what happened with me in my 6 year. And I had a chronic health issue that I was able to completely resolve, and now has never been an issue since. And so I'm so grateful for that. But that was a really big process of healing for me.
So if my math and memory serves me correctly, my 6 year was COVID, and
Yes,
it was
it was.
all about family, and lots of family, and homeschooling. And so it was also about giving back. And I love that you mentioned that, because I didn't know that the 6 year was about giving back, but that was where I started. We both did, but that was where I started to really pour into people. And the one thing that we got in COVID that we didn't have before COVID, and we've spoken about this, was time. And so I took a tremendous amount of time pouring into people of need. And I gave and gave and gave selflessly of myself all throughout COVID because we had time. We had so much time to pour into people, so much time to spend with family. And what's really beautiful is I also only ever fell in love with myself towards the end of that year. I just remember it being the very first time that I started to have a relationship with Rudi, a physical relationship with Rudi, loving Rudi's body, loving, my height or my muscular size, and just being like, well, I'm perfect the way I am, and not feeling a disconnect between who I am and where I wanted to go. So what a beautiful year.
It was a beautiful year. And 6 is also, a heightened focus around the home. So that was also the year we were completely remodeling the house. We had just bought a new home and we had gutted it. And it was like, we had all the time in the world to really work on the house and renovate. And so it's really normal for you to want to kind of nest in a 6 year. It's also the will I stay or will I go year. And what I mean by that is it's usually a year that has a heightened focus on marriage, but also divorce and babies. If you look at the 6 looks pregnant. Well, a lot of babies are, potentially conceived in a 5 year, which actually 5 years has a heightened sense of sensuality and all things sexuality. And no surprise then that a lot of babies are born in a 6 year. And then with that comes increased responsibility and of giving of yourself and your time in ways that, of course, a newborn baby would require. So moving on to a personal year number 7. The 7 is the mystic. That's the archetype of that number. And the 7 is really going to draw you in, and it's going to have you ask the question, like, who am I really? Like, will the real me please stand up? That's what this year is going to ask you. It's going to, draw you in. This is a year that you're not going to feel quite as social. Things might slow down around you, where maybe before you felt like it was like busy. And then all of a sudden you're kind of finding this space and finding this time. For me, I have just finished my 7 year, so I can speak very personally about this. It's very fresh. I'm in the last couple of days of my 7 year right now. And it was a beautiful time for me because I knew I was going into this energy. I knew this was going to be a year for spiritual expansion. Some years are really externally focused and they're about external expansion, but you only expand to the degree that you expand within. When you expand within, then you're going to be able to see that mirrored outside of you. So it makes sense that the 7 year comes before the 8 year, which we'll talk about in a second, which is very externally focused. So in the 7 year, you're going to be drawn to seeking, drawn to knowledge, to not only understanding maybe more spiritual philosophies or things that are, going to help you question things or have new questions for yourself, but also, knowledge about yourself. This is a year where you get to get really clear on, who am I? What do I like? What's my purpose? I wrote a whole entire book on purpose this year. That's no accident that this happened in my 7 year, because I think the 7 year really is going to help you answer those questions and get clarity. The 7 year isn't always about necessarily putting into action all the dreams. It's about getting really, really clear on you, not only as a physical being, but you as a spiritual being.
I remember my 7 year, Anniston said, you won't feel as busy. And she doesn't mean you're not going to be very, very busy. She means the energy will not feel like it's so busy. I was the busiest I had ever been in my 7 year. I had a full roster of clients. I was working all day, every day, and it was all consuming, and my business was thriving. But I was trying to find the joy in my business. I was like, I'm so grateful to be doing this work, but I feel handcuffed to my work now. And that's when I started to clarify, who do I want to be and what do I want my business to be? And I love doing what I do inside of companies. I love doing it in organizations where I can impact a large number of people with the same amount of time, effort, and energy versus working with one person and potentially creating an impact in one person. And that was where I really started to question, is the work that I'm doing reaping the reward? With the effort I'm putting in, is it maximizing the potential of growth and change? And the feeling of the year being slow was really more about the internal dialogue I was having, where I was reconciling my thoughts, my dreams, my goals, my desires, my aspirations, and then laying them over. What am I actually doing every day? And if I could, what could I change? It was a great year.
I remember that. And I also remember there were certain times in the year that really called you to trust. I remember at one point there were some things that were happening. We had just invested a lot of money in this whole marketing tool, and we weren't getting the results that we wanted. And I remember you at one point, you were like, you kind of like threw up your hands and you were like, I'm letting go. I'm just going to let go and trust and surrender. And what was so crazy was we didn't ultimately make the decision that we weren't aligned integrity wise with the marketing, whatever that what we were doing at the time. And we decided to, even though we had invested all this money, we were going to trust that it's okay to walk away from, that we didn't feel aligned with it anymore. And then like 2 weeks later, you got like 3 new businesses that were approaching you and saying, we really want to hire you. We really want, and it was not from marketing. It was just, they came out of nowhere. And I remember that was such a moment.
It really was. And I want to give people the dollar value for the context, because I think there's the value. We had put $50,000 into a marketing, campaign that would bring people into our business. And after we had invested all the money, because the money goes in on the front end, they build everything in the back end. And when they'd finished building everything and it was now time to start making money out of this $50,000 investment, we didn't like the way that it had been done. We didn't like the feeling of it. It just didn't feel aligned with us. It was out of our personal integrity. It felt very bait and switchy, and we just didn't care for it. And so we had to make a decision. Are we going to walk away from $50,000, or are we going to let them do this marketing campaign so we can recoup our $50,000 and then walk away? And that was just where I was like, no, I just feel so out of alignment with this. I'm not even going to be attached to the $50,000. And that's a lot of money. But we just walked away. And as Anniston so beautifully said, it came back, and it came back beautifully and in a way that felt in alignment with who we are.
I believe it was definitely a test. And I think it was one that it took a lot of faith and a lot of being willing to trust. So this is a year that will again teach you to trust, like the 5-year, but in a different way. And I think really more so being true to who you are. All right, so moving on with personal year number 8. So the 8 year is a really powerful year. It's very externally focused. And this is a year that's going to bring about financial expansion. It's going to be a major theme on self-empowerment. And it's also going to be about manifestation and creating what it is that your heart's desire. The 8 itself the archetype is the magician. And this is really about, and I love that, it comes right after the 7-year when you're getting really clear on who you are, right? If you do your work in your 7-year, you're going to have a level of clarity that you haven't had maybe ever. Now you get to take that clarity and you get to bring it out into physical form through your powers as a co-creator of your life experience. And this really plays into that theme of empowerment, because, you will manifest what you want. Also, what you don't want, that's potentially, if that's what you're focused on, but you are going to be manifesting to the degree that you feel empowered to do so. So this is going to be a year where you are going to be, tested, if you will, on, do you feel capable of what you believe you want? Do you feel like it's possible for you? And so this is a great year. If you haven't already done it in your 7-year, this is a really great year to revisit, what's my belief system about my ability to create the dreams that are on my heart? And also, is what I'm creating aligned with me? Because you're not gonna, in the 7-year, you're thinking about, you're getting really clear. Maybe you're not experiencing firsthand the benefits of, or, the end result of your creation. Whereas in your 8-year, this is where things really speed up. So, what you reap, you will sow. So if what you're focusing on or what you're putting your energy into isn't something that lights you up or that you want to experience more of, this is your time to be like, okay, hold on a second. Let me refocus. Let me really get clear on what it is that I want, so I'm focusing on the right things. And also, let me make sure I have the belief system to support me in creating that.
For me, this was a year where I had to set a little more boundaries in my life and in my business. And I was in the growing stages of my business. And so a lot of opportunities would come my way, but people would say, oh, well, we just want you to do this for free. Like, come and speak here and help us out. And I would start to do those things because it was getting my name out there. It was moving my business forward, but I wasn't being compensated for it. And then that was when I really got to clarify on, how much money, is enough, how much time is worth the effort to be put in, and then what is my self-worth to me worth. And that was where I started putting down really strong, clear, defining boundaries of here's what I'll do, here's what you're going to get from it, and turning opportunities down no matter how great they sounded if they didn't fit with what I had set for myself.
Yeah, this can be a dream maker year, really, truly. And this is not the year to play small and to be safe, like to play it safe. Take some risks, really give it a go for your dream. Like of all the years in terms of the external focus, you have more opportunity in an 8-year for quantum leaps forward and great expansion in your life if you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's again where, whatever you need to do this year to support you, hire a coach. If there's ever a year to have a coach, this is the year, whether it be a business coach, if you're wanting to grow your business, or a personal coach or a fitness coach to help you get to that next level, because this is that year that you're going to be able to see those results mirrored back to you. It's also a year that's going to teach you resilience and determination. The 8-year, it's going to feel frenetic and busy compared to the 7-year. You're going to be like wishing for your, spiritual retreat of your 7-year. And your 8-year sometimes be like, oh my gosh, like I feel like it's just never ending. It's never stopping. Your schedule is going to feel a lot busier, but again, it's all about how you look at it, right? And there's a season for everything. And this is a season that's going to teach you, okay, how do I build the habits that are going to support me in expansion, right? So priming, what Rudi teaches. Perfect example of that. Are you priming every day? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you doing the things that are going to support you in succeeding and really maximizing this 8-year? And how you use your focus, right? Your focus is your currency, and it's like magic. How you use your focus and then how you use your discipline are going to negate the success of this year.
That was the year, and I remember in the very beginning of my 8-year, we were going on one of our Monday morning walks, and that was where I decided I wanted to move my business into speaking on stages, not just coaching in companies and doing company trainings. And I didn't have a speaking agent. I didn't hire somebody to support me in it. And that was when all of a sudden I started booking a tremendous amount of speaking engagements. And I remember booking 3 speaking engagements inside of 2 weeks from when we made the commitment that this was an area I wanted to focus in on my life and in my business. And it started to come together. And at every single speaking engagement that I did, I would then meet people who would then connect me to another speaking opportunity. And it just began to grow and grow. But I want everybody to take from this example is that it took focused concentration and making the decision and the commitment. I didn't have to have the action of now let's go and send out requests. And I do think action's required. But for me, it was just the action of saying, I want this, and this is what I'm going to be creating, and intentionally going into my morning routine and building that. And that's what came.
Well, you just use the key word there, intention. And I think this year is going to be so important for you to use the power of intention to help your mind and your brain to work for you, right? So by you saying, this is my intention, you're going to be focusing on that. Your brain's going to bring you information to help move you forward versus reminding you of who you've been. We actually recorded a really powerful episode on intention, a few weeks ago, I believe, or during our series on bringing spirituality into business. So please make sure to check that out, because it is definitely an important skill for you to have. Now, before we move on to 9, it's important for me to say this. The universal year this year is also 8. So let me explain that. Just like you have your own personal year, well, Earth also has its own personal year. And it just so happens that the personal year, or the universe, we'll call it the universal year, moving into 2024 is also 8. This means that every single person listening to this right now is going to get a dose of 8. Now, if you are working a personal year number, you're going to feel that more strongly. The 8 is going to be kind of that underlying energy that everyone is experiencing. So in 2023, that underlying energy was a 7. And the 7's about truth and seeking knowledge and it's about really people wanting, slowing down and going within, and, you know, and being introspective and getting into spirituality and getting into manifestation and meditation. And I think we saw a lot of that in 2023. Well, now the collective energy is going to be moving into that 8 energy. And remember, I said, what you reap is what you sow. So things are going to start speeding up, right? And, you know, some people can call this karma, you can call this whatever you want, but it's going to be really important that you are very cognizant of the choices that you're making and the intentions that you have behind your actions, and that what you do is done with integrity and for the good intentions of all. And because the earth has a way of balancing things, and this is a balancing year, and 8 is about, you know, really, it's about balancing. It's also about manifestation and creation. I imagine that a lot of business, there's gonna be a lot of new businesses, you know, blowing up. There's also going to be some that are crumbling. I think that it's really going to be about what is that business's foundation, and what is the energy, and what is their goal, and are they people centric, or are they all about the I? And this is really a year that's going to be about unity and community and creating, but creating for the good of all, instead of just creating for the few and benefiting the few. We need to find ways to create to benefit the many. So that's really the big theme for your 8 year. And then if we move on to the final year in the cycle, it's your 9 year. And the 9 year is about letting go. And it's the end of a cycle, which means that, you know, all the things that have happened up until that point have led you to a different elevation or a different point than you've ever been before. But before you can move forward into your next chapter, you need to make room. Now, this can be an unbelievable year, full of amazing, you know, changes and things that are, you know, leaving your life but coming into your life, to the degree that you are willing to let go of the oars and to surrender. And I think maybe if I was picking a word for a 9 year, I think surrender would be a really good one. Now, you are just finishing your 9 years. So what's your experience been?
You know, this year has been one of the greatest years of my life, because I have fully stepped into my purpose of who I am and who I want to be and how I want to show up. And I'm meeting the expectation that I have, which is the greatest reward I can have. You know, my relationships are stronger than they've ever been. My bank account is reflective of the inner work that I've been doing. But I've had to let go of some relationships that weren't serving me, and my expectation of relationships that I had to let go of. And I don't mean my relationship expectation with you or with the kids or with some of our close friends that we are in contact with daily. It's those past relationships that I still held on to and still had expectations for, that I would have disappointment in or frustration in, or, you know, why isn't it working, or why isn't it the same, or why don't they, you know, make as much effort. And it's in the releasing and the letting go where I really feel I've been able to heal a tremendous amount about who I am and where I'm going, which is reflective in just my overall joy and happiness every single day. But I'm also bringing in new friendships. And again, friendships are also like a cycle.
Yeah. The 9 year isn't just about letting go of things that you can see, touch, and feel. I think it's even more so about letting go of the things that you can't, which means, you know, certain ways of thinking and beliefs, like old outdated beliefs that don't serve who you are moving to be. You know, you need to let go of those old habits that no longer serve you, you know, and so that you can make room for new habits. This is really about the things in your identity of who you believe yourself to be that are still anchoring you to the past. And while your 8 year can be like, feel like you're in a canoe and you're paddling, and you're moving forward. The 9 year is when you get to that point in the river where you just let go of the oars and you have to let the current take you. And if the current's taking you one way, and maybe a relationship is going the other way, or a job that no longer serves you in your growth anymore, or a home, a lot of people will move. They'll move states, they'll move houses, they'll change jobs, they'll you know, potentially leave relationships. But it's not always that significant. It can also be a lot of inner work. And Rudi did a lot of releasing this year in terms of like old habitual things that, again, were serving him at one point for who he was, but not who he is now. And it takes those times and those years sometimes for us to do that, because again, he's moving into his 1 year, which means he will be able to start fresh and have this unbelievable new beginning, to the degree he allowed the old outdated structures, belief systems, habits, ways of being, and people and situations to go. And there's nothing wrong with letting go. This year can be challenging if you try to hold on for dear life. It will feel like you are trying to paddle upstream because the current is trying to take you one way, and you're just holding on, you're holding on, you're holding on. And what I want to say to you is, letting go is the most natural thing. And in truth, there are no endings. There's only beginnings.
So we hope that you have enjoyed listening to the numerology exercise of today and getting into the mind of my incredible wife and getting to see the value and the meaning in every single thing that's happening, because this is also true for every single month, day, and year. But if you can know what year you're going into, what year you've been coming out of, you can be a little more intentional about some of the thoughts and the feelings and the things that are coming on. And if you're going into a 9-year, it's time to start letting go of some of those limiting beliefs or those habits that aren't serving you. If you're going into a 1-year like I am, hey, this is all about screaming from the rooftops and being who you really came here to be. And so I'm excited for each and every single one of you to learn a little bit more about it. If you're curious and just have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Rate, review our podcast. We would greatly appreciate you to help spread our message. We also so desperately want to hear from you, and we want to know what resonated most with you from this episode. Share it with anyone who you think would benefit from hearing this message today. From each of us, we just want to say thank you so much. We love you tremendously. We'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast.